My name is Annamie Paul. I am the leader of the Green Party of Paul Manley, our MP for Nanaimo Ladysmith. Paul Manley was absolutely instrumental in the very earliest days after these notices were received in sounding the alarm, along with Jenica Atwin, our MP from Fredericton. And we have seen, we've seen this story being picked up more and more and being picked up by other political parties as well. And so we really wanted people to have the opportunity today to understand the human cost of what has been, the federal government is asking people in Canada who received the CERB in good faith, applied for it and received the CERB in good faith to do. It's very important that we put names and faces to what can be an anonymous story so that people understand that these are their friends, these are their family, these are people that are still struggling, that we are still in a pandemic, and we absolutely need to make sure that we protect people all the way through this pandemic and that we don't ask them to pay for the mistakes of other people and particularly of our government agencies. Alors, je vais passer le micro à Paul Manley pour faire des premières remarques. Et puis après, je vais introduire les autres participants ici qui sont des experts et aussi des Canadiens et Canadiennes qui sont affectés et touchés par les erreurs de notre agence de revenus et qui ne devraient pas, devraient pas être les personnes d'être responsables pour les erreurs de notre agence de revenus. And so with that, Paul, I'll just pass it to you.
Well, thank you so much, Annamie. I'm coming to you live from the unceded territory of the Nanaimo First Nation and the Hulkaminam speaking people. I first want to acknowledge that the government, really stepped up at the beginning of this pandemic to want to help people. And at the beginning, we were advocating right away for an emergency guaranteed livable income. This is a program that we have been advocating for many years with the Green Party. But we knew that as we watched different programs roll out, that there were gaps in these programs and there were going to be people falling through those gaps. And a lot of low-income people were completely missed in these programs. And so that was what we were calling for, is a system to make sure that nobody was left behind and that those that didn't need it could return it or based on their income tax wouldn't receive it or would have it taxed back. What we've seen in the last little while was completely predictable because there was so much confusion at the beginning. And, civil servants were working really hard to implement announcements that were made by the government, and civil servants were moved into the CRA and moved into Service Canada to deal with all of the requests and the need to help Canadians at the beginning of this pandemic with the lockdown. And there was a lot of confusion about what the rules were. It was impossible to get through on the phone and talk to people. And, there was mixed signals. The Minister of Finance said that anybody with revenue over $5,000 would be eligible as a self-employed person. Well, revenue, if you look at that as a business, that's your gross sales. And then to talk about it afterwards as your gross income before taxes, there was so much confusion about what they meant by gross. And it wasn't clear on the landing page. You had to go through all the lists of frequently asked questions, and it was way down the list to actually find the information that was needed. And so people applied in good faith. And in my riding, I have people who are on disability benefits, who have self-employment to top up what they're allowed to earn. They're allowed to earn $12,000 on disability benefits a year in British Columbia before that gets clawed back. People who are self-employed, they're using their expenses. They're declaring expenses that are helping them pay their rent, that are helping them pay their utilities, that are helping them pay their expenses. There are people who put more money into their business last year to buy equipment, to buy supplies, had additional write-offs, and that's the way business cycles can go. You can have years where you have less expenses and years where you have more expenses. And being somebody that's been in business, I understand that completely. One year when my camera died, I had to buy a new camera. And so it incurred a whole lot of other business expenses in that year. We have people who applied who have low literacy levels and cognitive disabilities who applied, who weren't necessarily eligible. There's a wide spectrum of people. And my real concern is that these people are stressed, that they are upset, and this is the darkest time of year. People are isolated in the second wave of this pandemic, and we need to make sure that they know that we are here to fight for them, to make sure that they don't need to worry about paying this back, because this is on the government. So I'll pass it back to you, Annamie. I think there's a lot that needs to be done on the part of the government to own up to this mistake.
That's exactly it. This is not at all, thank you so much, Paul. This is not the place for the government to be going to find money. We promised, as you said, it wasn't just the government, because it's a minority parliament. And so every party banded together in the early days of this pandemic to make the commitment that we were going to be there for people in Canada from the start to the end of this pandemic. The pandemic is not over. The devastation of the pandemic is not over. And so if we're going to really be faithful to that promise, then we have to make sure that we're there for people until the very end. And let's hear some of those stories now. It's really, as I said, important to understand that this is having an impact in real time. When we hear the government saying that we should wait and not to worry and not to be anxious, I can't understand how one wouldn't be. I want to turn to Pan now. Pan, your story is one of the many that we've been hearing, but I really want you just to say in your own words what your experience has been since you received this notification and just the process that you went through to apply in the first place.
Yes, thank you, Annamie, and thanks for having me and this opportunity for me to speak out. I want to just introduce my background a little bit. So I'm a self-employed paralegal based in Toronto, and I actually just opened my practice in May 2019. So my practice is a startup, and so I know, like, as a startup, I have probably relatively high expenses than a regular ongoing businesses. So before the first lockdown in March 2020, I actually wasn't expecting that I will make profits high enough to cover my expenses. And but actually, by the first lockdown, I was able to make 8,000 revenue as a business income. But when the first lockdown came, and my client intake was like largely reduced, and I wasn't able to make further income as revenue. But ongoing, I had to pay my expenses in light of my revenue is significantly reduced. So when I realized I could apply for CERB, so I checked I checked the eligibility requirements, and the website clearly said self-employment income for $5,000 as a threshold. So I was actually talking to a friend. I was saying, okay, so they didn't really mention, the governmental website didn't really mention is net income or gross income. So I assumed, so they meant gross income, which is the revenue. And I knew, like, I made way higher than the 5,000 threshold. So I just applied, and I got the whole 14,000 CERB benefits until December the 2nd or the 3rd. I received a letter from the CRA saying that you're not eligible because I should have used net income instead of gross income. And then I suddenly realized, okay, that was not what I read when I was applying for it. And that's basically my story. And for me, like, as a startup business, first of all, I didn't expect to make that high revenue, and clearly this pandemic was beyond control, and especially when the lockdown started, when I still have to pay expenses, I had no way to make 5,000 net income to be eligible for CERB. And I was just feeling unfair for this this letter, because I personally felt I was left out.
Yeah.
And it was to me, it was like I worked hard to open my practice, to be a self-employment, but it sounded to me like simply because this letter sounded to me, it was like simply because you didn't make enough income, so I'm sorry, you're not eligible, and whatever impact due to this pandemic is all my responsibilities. So that's my story. Yes.
Thank you very much, Pen, for sharing that. And I'm sure that sounds very familiar to a lot of people. I'm going to move on now to Marilyn out in British Columbia. And again, these are the stories that have been coming in all over the country. And Marilyn, can you please share and just, I mean, we could spend a lot of time talking about these, and I think that they deserve a full hearing so that people understand. But if you can just share briefly the story of your family, we would appreciate that. Oh, sorry, you're on mute. Just a moment.
Yes, my daughter applied by making a phone call to the government, and they sent her $4,000 in July, and $2,000 in August, and $2,000 on September the 4th. This was just done by a phone call from her. And then the last time she phoned to get more money, they said that it was fraud and that she had committed fraud. And she phoned me very, very upset. She's on a disability pension. They didn't check with the provincial government before they sent this money to her. My daughter has learning difficulties. She has addictions, and she has a mental illness, schizophrenia. And she was very, very upset. And she said, she was supposed to pay this money back, but she doesn't have much money. Like she gets a disability pension, and then she gets some CPP. And at the end of the day, she has $975 income for now. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Out of that, she has to pay $800 for her lodging in Serenity Lodge in Nanaimo. Mm-hmm. And she didn't realize that she was committing fraud. It was just.
Well, she wasn't. So let's not call it that. Okay. And I assume, Marilyn, that your daughter does not have the means to pay back this amount.
No, she does not. And I really don't want to pay it for her.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Marilyn. And then finally on the phone we have Corey. Corey, if you want to just share your story with the folks, please.
Hi, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to do so. So I just want to note that I'm speaking on behalf of my spouse, Deanne, who operates a private daycare from our home. She has done so for the past 12 years. And in New Brunswick here, they mandated us to close our doors very early on, for her to close the doors to the daycare very early on. So at first, we were kind of worried about how we were going to get by with, we although she doesn't make a great deal of money doing this or running this business, it's enough to make ends meet for us, and we're appreciative of that, right? Plus, she loves what she does. And So we went onto the website. I've owned a business in the past. Interpreted what I saw based on the bracket that said before taxes. I assumed that that was gross income as well. So we looked at that. She applied for it. She received the benefits in full up to the $14,000. And look, the CERB did exactly what it was supposed to do in our case. It helped us keep our heads above water. So when she received this letter in early December telling her that she was going to have to pay it all back, like it was, at first, I think we were a little bit confused and thought, well, there had to be some sort of mistake. So once she contacted the CRA, the agent that she spoke to at the time on the phone, he advised her to look at the back of her letter where it said net income. Well, it's not just a little bit ambiguous. That's a contradiction in my mind of what was proposed to us. So, we're at that point now where we have no idea how we're going to pay back $14,000. She's still, as of yesterday, she shut down her business because she can't possibly pay this money back and operate a business. So now she has to go outside of the home, go back into the regular workforce to try to find something that we can potentially do to make some money to help pay that back if it's necessary. But I mean, look, the reality is it's a 3-letter word. All of this could have been avoided by putting a 3-letter word on that main page. And what frustrates me the most about it is I believe that the CRA was made aware of these possible ambiguities early on. And if they were, why would they hide that in late April? Why would they hide the word net in late April in the QA section? Why not, if they thought there was going to be issues with it, why not put it at the front and center? They also need to do their due diligence too. I understand they needed to get this in people's hands quickly, but they still need to vet these applicants. So if there was the potential for there to be ambiguity there, and they knew that, why not start looking at these early on? And maybe then, send out the letter a month into it, so that people are advised that they need to look into this a little bit further early on. Don't wait until they've already collected the full thing at $14,000 and then just before Christmas tell them they got to pay it back in 30 days or there could be consequences. Yeah. The whole way that this has been handled so far is it's ludicrous. And I think that there's enough evidence popping up now all over the place with voice recordings, with alpha pages of the website that even say gross income in the URL for the section that points out that the qualification. As Mr. Manley said, the finance minister stating that it's revenue. There's so many things pointing to the fact that this is just a big mess that I don't believe that we need to write it off altogether, but admit the federal government should just make a mistake, admit that they made a mistake. They'll still get the tax money back from most of us. Like, we were smart enough to put that money aside because we knew it was taxable income. Get that money back from us and just, don't worry about it from this point on. It just seems to make more sense. In my opinion, it's a whole lot better than a possible class action suit where people, that could potentially make things a whole lot worse.
Yeah, thank you so much, Corey. And yes, we're going to turn it over to some people who are representing large, groups that had also been affected by this. But just to say at this point that's exactly it. This is a mistake, and the question is the government going to own up to the mistake? And what are they going to do about it? Are they going to put this mistake on the backs of people who are still struggling, who are absolutely in need? The 3 stories that we've heard, are these the kind of people that we want to see having to wear the mistake that was made? It feels like a real bait and switch when you're talking about having people apply, and we were all there. People were told to apply, don't hesitate, apply. And now they're being told that whatever mistake was made, they're going to have to deal with it. So That's the question for the government now: are these the people? Are these the kind of people that we want to be going after to bear the burden of the mistake that was made, which was not theirs? And I think we know the answer to that. But if we know the answer, then we need the action. And I'm going to pass it over now to two people who are going to tell us a little bit more about, again, the hidden stories and the hidden costs of this mistake that was made. We know that there are people that continue to fall through the cracks. We know that we needed an emergency benefit exactly because we still don't have a complete social safety net. I'm just going to pass it over now to Cheyenne. Cheyenne is the co-founder. Sorry, just let me pull up. Yep. Cheyenne is the co-founder of the Ontario Children's Advancement Coalition. And she's going to be helping us understand the perspective of how this CERB clawback is going to be affecting Canadian youth that are at risk. These are the stories that aren't being discussed enough, and we want to make sure that we highlight them today. Cheyenne?
Thank you so much, first of all, for having us today. I'm actually here from Scarborough, Ontario, which is the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And so, first of all, the people that we're representing are people from the child welfare system. And I just want to ground and give some context about, well, who the heck are they? And so these are young people who have been forced into the community by themselves at 18 years old. They come from trauma histories, whether it's chronic trauma, complex trauma. Chronic means that it's trauma lifelong. Complex means it's multiple types of trauma at the same time. And so because these are very vulnerable members of our societies, and because they're so young, it's very problematic that the CERB is going to be causing a lot of negative impact on young people. We were already, and just to disclose as well, I grew up in the child welfare system myself in group homes. And so I'm a lived expert from this community myself. And so I know that, prior to this pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic, we were already experiencing pandemics in our population. The child welfare system is the biggest pipeline into poverty, into homelessness, into further institutionalization as well. And so with the CERB, it was kind of like a lot of people were like, okay, we're not sure if we're eligible for this. And so it's like, yeah, let's call CRA, let's figure this out. And the CRA representatives, government representatives, were encouraging young people to be like, you know what, just see if you're eligible, just sign up for it. And then they got it. And now there is this, reality that some of these young people are going to be asked to provide that money back when they're already in the margins and beyond the margins and struggling, and probably won't be able to pay back that money. I mean, some of these people are 18 years old. Some of them are probably even 17 years old. They're very young. And so the question for me is whether the government would be able to actually look into CERB amnesty. And I know Rachel will talk more about that as well. But CERB amnesty is going to be very important for young people from these marginalized populations who are extremely vulnerable. It's not just the child welfare label that they have, right? There's intersectionality that plays a role too. They could be Black, they could be living in poverty, they could be part of the LGBTQ community. All these different things are compounded. And when you have multiple intersections that are oppressed, it just makes the matter even more exacerbated. So what can we do for our young people to make sure that they are not going to be nixed and they're not going to be further violated, because poverty is a violent system. The child welfare system is a violent system. And how are we going to make sure that these young people are going to be supported and that they will not need to pay back any of this money because it's not their fault? They are children. We cannot do this to our children. This is Canadian children, the people who are the most vulnerable in Canada in terms of young people. And we need to definitely seriously take a look at CERB amnesty for young people, but also families who are experiencing poverty as well.
Thank you so much. Incredibly well said. And I'm going to let that speak for itself and just pass us along now to Rachel. Rachel is the Executive Director of the Child Welfare League of Canada. Rachel, can you add to that, please?
I sure will. Thank you for bringing attention to this issue. So the Child Welfare League has been working with First Voice advocates like Cheyenne and other networks First Voice-led networks across the country, one, to put in place moratoriums or to call for moratoriums to be put in place. Most jurisdictions have a moratorium on transitions out of care during COVID. So young people who are in child welfare have the option to remain where they are and continue to receive services. So the federal government also put in a moratorium early on transitions for First Nations out of child and family services. So there's a moratorium in place, a recognition that this population is especially vulnerable, always, but also especially during times such as these. So and because they've been encouraged to apply, the CERB really did help them remain in their housing, help them buy food. It was helpful and it should not be clawed back. It'll create distress, could result in homelessness. And it was helping young people just barely get by. We're not out of the woods yet. So as recognition that's already been given that this is an especially vulnerable population, we really think that amnesty should be offered and provided to young people in and from care. That could include also extend to people who are in extreme poverty. I heard the Prime Minister just a few minutes before this say that they were looking into situations in the coming months that they, please everybody don't worry, and we're going to look into resolving this. So I'm really hoping that there will be easy solutions for young people from care. A simple letter to demonstrate that they've been in care might, an easy way for them to get back to CRA and have amnesty. So it should not be so complicated. So I think there's a way that we can support, and if there's goodwill from all parties to support the most vulnerable, we can certainly make it happen.
That's exactly it. This is not a partisan thing. This is not a political thing. This is about making sure that people who need help get it. And it's something that I said several weeks ago when we were first sounding the alarm bells about this, that it's really a no-brainer. And we also know what we need to do. So this is not a complex thing that needs to be figured out. The question now is, are we going to go after people who really needed this help because of an error that was made that was not their fault, or are we going to protect them and use this as a teaching moment, as a lesson about the holes that we still have in our social safety net? Because this was something that was created because there was nothing else, and when it's gone, there really isn't anything to replace it and to deal with the structural issues that you've both highlighted. So thank you very much. I'm just going to quickly turn back to our MP, Paul Manley, because Paul drafted, and our other members of our caucus signed on to a letter that was sent to the minister, just setting out the 4 things that clearly should happen. Paul, do you want to just maybe mention those 4 action items that you sent to the minister?
Yeah, so clearly we need the minister to send another letter immediately to make an announcement and send another letter to alleviate people's fears. We need forgiveness for people who applied based on the gross income that they were making. And we need to make sure that anybody who does have to pay this back doesn't pay interest on it, has very low terms for payback, and that anybody that has to make a repayment is also not having to pay income tax on these funds. There's so many low-income Canadians that are affected by this, and we also want the government to be going after those that are gaming the system, the wealthy that are gaming the system, and we're hearing more and more about this in the news, about golf courses and long-term care, private long-term care facilities, paying out dividends, padding bank accounts. And we know that many, many corporations have used COVID relief programs, and that the wealthy are benefiting from it. And that's who the CRA should be going after, not the most vulnerable Canadians and small business people who are struggling.
That's right. And even I'm listening to our speakers today, even going beyond that, to really recognize the facts of life, which is that there are people who don't have other sources of income, who continue to fall through the cracks. And this was a lifeline that would be very cruel to pull out from under them. I am going to turn it now. We in the Green Party, we try to be very much about proposition and solutions as well. And we want this to be a moment for us to really take a very hard look at the people who continue not to have any proper social safety net, that continue to fall between the cracks, and also what comes next. What comes next? How are we going to make sure that we are better protected in the future, that people can live in dignity from the first day to the last day? We've invited Floyd to come just to very briefly, because it's very important for us to talk about what comes next, to very briefly share some thoughts with us about what a difference guaranteed livable income might have made in this exact situation and why we need one. Floyd, do you want to just share some ideas with the folks?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Floyd Bernescu. I also run a mid-sized business that was decimated by COVID. I really feel for a lot of people that whose stories we've heard of from today. And also the founder of UBI Works, organization that advocates for universal basic income or guaranteed livable income. And it's really important to note that if we'd already had a guaranteed livable income in this country, all this mess, all this confusion, so much stress, so much lives would have been changed. Back in March, people would have automatically been able to scale up their income if they face a sudden loss. The system would have already been in place. Economists call that an automatic stabilizer. It's a huge economic benefit to have an automatic stabilizer where incomes are caught up quickly in times of crisis, or whether it's a personal crisis or a crisis facing an entire planet as we're facing now. In fact, the governor of the Bank of Canada, outgoing governor, said we need something CERB-like for the future for times like this. That something is a guaranteed livable income. And if we had one like that, people could have made much better use of their time. Instead of living in having to reapply every month, trying to prove that they're a worthy person looking for work when there's lockdowns in place, and obviously there aren't those jobs, people could have been spending that time taking courses, like learning what they're going to do next, taking advantage of this time to innovate, to try new things, to learn new things, to prepare for a post-COVID world. Because that's what a lot of the large businesses are doing that have the means. They're investing, and they're investing in the latest technology, planning for a post-COVID world. People don't have that opportunity because they're placed in a system very typical of today's social assistance systems, which assume that you're not trustworthy and make you prove yourself every so often. A guaranteed livable income is not like that at all. It assumes trust, and people would have had the means to make choices that are right for them for this moment in time and better for their futures. And that would lead to a more productive and a more resilient economy. Would have been better outcomes for everyone. UBI Works had started a Facebook group called the Unofficial CERB group, and has 15,000 members. And I'm just blown away at the amount of confusion there was throughout this period of time. It's very confusing. Any kind of means testing is extremely confusing. And CERB was confusing despite hearing from MPs and from Trudeau that it'll be a couple of clicks just to get the income. So what we really need is a system that is simple, people understand, whether it's income tested or it's a dividend, like a true universal basic income where everyone just gets it automatically. If we had that, we'd have been better off. And if we had it now, we'll still be better off.
Thank you very much, Floyd. And thank you so much to all of you for sharing your stories and your insights. I really hope that this message is going to get into the hands of the people that have it within their power to make the change today. This is something that should not at all be worn by the people who are most vulnerable, who are most at risk. We need to acknowledge a mistake was made, and the mistake, any correction of that mistake should not be worn by these people. I really took it very seriously. I know that Paul did. Our caucus, I believe every single member in Parliament meant it when they committed to people in Canada that they were going to be there for them throughout this pandemic. This is completely the opposite of that. And so we will continue to just be a thorn in the side of the government until they do what is right. It's simply not good enough to say that things will work out in the end. I'm the leader of a political party, but I'm also someone who's in this community. I know that every single person watching has a family member or a friend, or they know someone who has been caught up in this terrible situation. And so I'm saying that on their behalf, even if you're not directly affected, please make sure that your MPs know that you want to see these repayment demands stopped, that we want to see amnesties for those who have no other means of supporting themselves during this period, that we don't want the mistake to be borne by the people least able to bear this kind of mistake, that we want people in Canada to be taken care of all through this pandemic and beyond, through things like a guaranteed livable income. That is something that we can all do. The government has it in its hands to make this change, to make it today, to send out a second letter reassuring people that the first one was just a bad mistake. Let's make sure that everyone can have a holiday season with the least anxiety possible, or certainly not compounded with this. And with that, I really want to thank you all very, very much for being here with us. I hope we don't have to do this again. You know, I hope that the message is getting through this time, but you can count on us to keep doing it. As I said, our caucus has sent another letter. We're going to continue to be pushing and advocating for this. And thank you for all that you've done to raise awareness about this very time-sensitive, very high-pressure issue for a lot of people in Canada. Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.